break down the NFL Coaching Carousel, maybe the most wildest NFL coaching cycle in the over now 100-year history of the National Football League. The way we're going to do this is we're going to do it by a division. So I've broken it up by division, not by hires. I think it's the most easiest thing to do. Now, I do want to note that I am recording this on February 1st, 2026, a week out from the Super Bowl. So the Raiders and the Arizona Cardinals have not hired their coaches yet. We have a little bit of an inkling on who the Raiders head coach will be. I'm also going to talk about the three new offensive coordinators, and really four, but with Tennessee hiring Brian Dable, that combination of Sawa and Dable are sort of together. But the three big offensive coordinator hires in Los Angeles, with the Chargers, in Detroit, and in Philadelphia. But we're going to start with the head coaches. We're going to talk about Joe Brady, who becomes the new head coach of the Bills, replacing Sean McDermott, a move that I said the Bills should have made 5 years ago. And again, the ironic thing is that Sean McDermott got fired because the Bills lost that game to Denver. And I think Buffalo truly believed that they were going to beat the Patriots, wrongly or not, and go to the Super Bowl this season. And just seeing the devastation, I think, Bagula decided that they needed to make a change. And I think Josh Allen had a say. And I think Josh Allen said, as much as I like Brian Dable, I like Joe Brady more. I like this offense that we're running. He's really gotten James Cook involved. Yes, we need more pieces on the offense side of the ball. Yes, Brandon Beane has not done a great job of drafting. But overall, I think Josh Allen and Joe Brady have a great relationship. I think Joe Brady is a young offensive mind. I loved what he did at LSU a while ago with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, um, Justin Jefferson, that LSU team. Also had Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield. He did pretty good things in Carolina when he was there, and obviously what he's done with Josh Allen, in my opinion, no fault of his own, has done nothing but win. I mean, the Bills' offense has not let them down these past three postseasons. It's been the defense. So I was an advocate of Joe Brady getting a head coaching job even before the Buffalo job was open. I didn't think his name was talked enough a lot. Now I get it. Between the press conference where they talked bad about the coaching staff drafting Keon Coleman and the fact they needed a change of voice and the fact that they promoted from within, it all does seem odd. But to me, as long as you have Josh Allen, the Super Bowl window is still open. I think Joe Brady is going to have success there in Buffalo. For Miami, Jeff Hadley is a defensive guy, and I speculated this. I said they could have gone with Matt Burke, the Texans defensive coordinator, or another defensive guy because, when they had Mike McDaniel, it didn't seem like they were tough enough. I thought they were going to go in another direction. Jeff Hadley is a former head coach at Boston College, so he's done this before. The question for the Dolphins is they have two obviously very expensive receivers in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I expect them to try to move off Tyreek Hill this offseason, though I know that's going to be difficult. And what is Jeff Halfway in this new regime in Miami going to think of Tua Tagovailoa? The new general manager, by the way, also comes from Green Bay, where they invest in the quarterback position. I don't think they believe Quinn Ewers is a franchise quarterback. I would not be surprised if Miami took a swing. Maybe not in the first round because they are going to have to get the defense side of the ball right. They don't have a lot of pieces, especially up front. A lot of the pieces they did have, Jalen Phillips, Christian Wilkins have been gone the past couple of seasons. I don't know if they're going to want to keep Minka Fitzpatrick there in the secondary, but I think that, Jeff Halfway is going to try to correct that defense. And, they're in a very tough division now with Josh Allen and Drake May. The Jets, I just discount. I mean, I have no idea what the Jets are doing offensively. I think they're going to tank. They're not getting Fernando Mendoza. I think them and Spoiler, the Cleveland Browns, are on Arch Manning alert. But Miami may be too. I mean, I think that they're going to invest in the quarterback position. I think they'll be okay. I don't think they'll be great. I think the Tua Tagovailoa situation puts it in doubt. I do think that the Las Vegas Raiders are going to end up getting Quinn Kubiak, who I think is underrated as a head coach. If he wins the Super Bowl this Sunday, I think that he is the big reason why the Seahawks win. I think he is the biggest reason why Sam Darnold has played well, why Jackson Smith and Jigba has popped off, and why the Seattle Seahawks have had such success this season. I think Tom Brady looks at that system. I think he really likes the system. I think he's running the head coaching search. I think Brady sees a lot of Fernando Mendoza in him. So, and I think the Quinn Kubiak Fernando Mendoza pairing will be a really good pairing. And you add him with Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer is still there. That's a couple good weapons. They're going to have to go in free agency and address the offensive line. Obviously, we'll see if Quinn Kubiak and his modern offensive day scheme for this Raiders team is enough to keep Max Crosby happy. It'll be very interesting to see where they go as defensive coordinator because their defense obviously needs work. And they need to invest in the wide receiver position, which I think they could do in free agency and maybe early in the draft. And I think, second, third, fourth round, you sort of address the offensive line and the defense. And they're in a very tough division, obviously. Justin Herbert, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, Bo Nix, Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes. But Quinn Kubiak and Fernando Mendoza give you a way better of a fighting shot than Derek Carr or John Gruden, than Antonio Pierce and Aiden O'Connell, than Pete Carroll and Geno Smith. That's for sure. Um, I thought the Browns coaching search was an absolute disaster. I've talked about it a lot on championship rings with my debate partner Josh Younger, who of course is a big Cleveland Browns fan. I thought it was coaching malpractice, the way they could have had Grant Uditsky, Nate Sneelhouse, but they decided that the new head coach needed to keep Jim Schwartz, and they were so afraid of losing Jim Schwartz, they didn't even offer him the job. And then Jim Schwartz gets pissed off, and now I believe is no longer going to be a part of the Cleveland Browns organization. I don't think he's coming back. We saw Todd Monken obviously joke with Shador Sanders. They almost started him in Baltimore, and I'm not denying Todd Monken's a good offensive mind. He got the best out of Lamar Jackson the last 2 years before the Ravens offense fell apart this year due to injuries, and it was a time for a change in Baltimore. But Todd Monken is 60 years old. And I'm not the age guy necessarily here, but you see Jeff Halfley, Joe Brady, Jesse Minter, even Robert Sala, who's relatively young, right? We've Kevin Stefanski, relatively young, Drew Penting, offensive coordinator of the Lions, Sean Mannion for the Eagles, new offensive coordinator, 33. Chargers, Mike McDaniel, still pretty young as the OC. But when you are a head coach and you get your first head coach at 60 years old, it reminds me a lot of Vic Fangio in Denver. I get Todd Monken may bring some stability. He may bring some toughness to this team. But this organization just feels lost. I don't think Andrew Berry should have retained his job. I think that's an even bigger issue than Kevin Stefanski. I think if you would have had a Grant Uditsky or an Nate Sneelhouse and you have Jim Schwartz or another former head coach as the defensive coordinator, I think it could have worked. I think the Browns need to go with a young, innovative offensive mind. If they truly believed in George Sanders and his development, to me, because I don't trust Andrew Berry drafting skill position players, and the biggest need on this team, along with offensive line, is wide receivers. And you almost don't need to draft defense at all in this draft. You need to attack the offensive side of the ball. This to me smells like a one and done. Shador's going to be pretty bad. He won't be the worst quarterback in the world, but he's going to be awful. The Browns are going to lose a crap ton of games, and then the Jets are competing for Arch Manning because Jimmy Haslam wants Arch Manning because he has a relationship to the Manning family, obviously with their Tennessee ties. And if I'm a Browns fan, I would be looking least forward to this season even more so than being a Jets fan because of the potential you might have had. It just feels like a waste of time in that coaching search if they did all this to go after a young, innovative offensive mind and then they go get Todd Monken and they didn't even keep Jim Schwartz. It feels like to me you might as well have kept Kevin Stefanski. And if you wanted Jim Schwartz so bad, you should have fired Kevin Stefanski midway through the season and gave Jim Schwartz a shot at being the interim head coach. Mike McCarthy is the offensive minded Mike Tomlin. He's serviceable. He wins. He has a Super Bowl. He gets the most out of his quarterback, just like Mike Tomlin got the most out of his defense. Except for when Mike McCarthy was in Dallas after the year Dan Quinn was his defensive coordinator, the defense was terrible. And the Steelers have the oldest and most expensive defense in the league, and their offensive talent. They got some pieces. Jalen Warren, Pat Fryermuth, DK Metcalf. That's a decent amount of tools in the tool chest. I'm not counting on Aaron Rodgers coming back. I have no idea what Aaron Rodgers' relationship is with Mike McCarthy. Last time I heard when he got fired in Green Bay, it was very sour, but maybe time heals all wounds. But to me, the Steelers say, we're the Steelers. We don't tank. We don't bottom out. Yeah, that's what the Patriots said. And then they bottomed out. They got Drake May, and they're back in the Super Bowl. I think this needs to be a hard reset for Pittsburgh if I'm the Steelers. I do not bring Aaron Rodgers back. I move off Cam Hayward. I move off TJ Watt. I move off Jalen Ramsey. I keep Joey Porter. I keep I Smith. I keep Patrick Queen. Some of those young, talented defensive players. I play Will Howard for 17 games. Hopefully he stays healthy. I see what I got in him. But if I don't got anything, I've got Dante Moore. I've got Arch Manning. I've got a very talented 2027 quarterback class. Where the reason why they got Ben Roethlisberger is because they picked seventh. They haven't been the same since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Jesse Minter, the former Charger defensive coordinator, had Baltimore Ravens written all over it. I'm very interested to see who his offensive coordinator is. There's rumors out there it could be Cliff Kingsbury, which I think would be a perfect fit for Lamar Jackson. Wasn't this feels like them going from John Harbaugh and they missed out on Mike McDonald, so they want to go with Jesse Minter, who may be the next Mike McDonald. He knows the Harbaugh. He's going to keep that culture. He has a relationship with Lamar Jackson. I think this is going to work. I think Jesse Minter is going to be a lot better of a defensive coordinator as a play caller than what Zach Orr was. And the Ravens defense was not terrible by the end of the year, but they always got off to horrific starts. The Chargers defense the last couple of years were top three, I believe, in scoring defense both years. The way he's going to use Kyle Hamilton to me will be fascinating. We don't know what Pittsburgh's going to be like. We'll see Joe Burrow coming back. Hopefully he stays healthy. I think Cincinnati is a team that you're going to have to deal with. But I do like the fit here with Jesse Minter and Baltimore as long as they get the right offensive coordinator. Now in Tennessee, when Robert Sala was first hired, it was a little bit of a what? Shouldn't they go with an offensive minded head coach to help Cam Ward the best they can? But Brian Dable is a perfect fit here. I mean, this is an all-star coaching staff. Robert Sala, who got that defense right immediately with the Jets. Now, you can make an argument that they had more talent than Tennessee. However, we've seen the Jets defense since Robert Sala was fired. And Jeff Ulbrich, who's a really good defensive coordinator, and Aaron Glenn, who was a really good defensive coordinator in Detroit, what they've done with the Jets defense. Aaron Glenn didn't even get a turnover this season and somehow kept his job. Um, I think Robert Sala could take his side of the ball. I think Brian Dable could take his side of the ball. This could almost be like a co-head coaching situation, which was actually pitched in Cleveland with Todd Monken and Jim Schwartz. But I think that this could be a similar situation in Tennessee where, Brian Dable is going to get the best out of Cam Ward. I think obviously their old team needs a rebuild. I mean, outside of Jeffrey Simmons and Cam Ward, I really don't know anybody on the roster besides Tony Pollard. And Nkunku is a decent tight end, but you obviously have to invest free agency, the draft, in receivers, in the secondary, defensive lines. I think they're going to go all over the map here. They're going to try to improve their team the best they can. And all of a sudden, I think Brian Dable is going to get the best out of Cam Ward. And I know you're dealing with that Texans defense. And if Daniel Jones is healthy for the Indianapolis Colts, they're going to be good. And we know what Liam Cohen and the Jaguars did last year. And that defense that didn't even allow a 75-yard rusher all season. But I think Tennessee's in really good shape to win a decent amount of games and really compete for that AFC South crown next season. The Giants are going to be one of everybody's favorite worst to first teams. I don't know about worst to first, but they're going to be really, really improved with John Harbaugh. What they, what, what's interesting though is I was really high on the Giants once I learned that Todd Monken was going to be their offensive coordinator because again, I thought he was a better OC than a head coaching candidate. But now it'll be interesting to see who John Harbaugh has brought in. I mean, maybe they go back to Greg Roman, who was fired by the Chargers. It does feel like the Harbaugh coaching tree that they bounce back and forth between Jim and John a lot. Joe Lombardi was there, I believe, 1 year with the Chargers under Jim. Maybe they go to him. He was fired by Denver. But the Giants roster is ready to win now. They just needed a culture change. They needed a leader. They have not had this since Tom Coughlin, since they won Super Bowl 46 against the Patriots 14 years ago. They've been in complete hell. Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, Malik Neighbors, Andrew Thomas, Wendell Robinson, that running back Tyron Tracy. Hey, that's a pretty good start on offense, right? I mean, all you really need is a tight end. Maybe you go out, you draft one later in the draft. Hey, mostly that is fixed. Defensive line, you got Dexter Lawrence, you got Brian Burns, you got Avon Thibodeau. We don't know yet about, um, excuse me, you got Abdul Carter. We don't know yet about Kayvon Thibodeau if he's going to be back, but that's one of the top two defensive lines in all football. So really, they need to work on their secondary and leadership. And again, I think this team was in a lot of close games. They lost last year with Mike Kafka as the interim head coach. I wouldn't even mind if they kept Mike Kafka as the offensive coordinator, to be honest with you. I thought he did some good things with Jackson Dart, who obviously is going to have to learn how to slide. If they can teach that, and Harbaugh's obviously used to a running quarterback because of what he did with Lamar Jackson, yeah, I think the Giants are going to easily double their win total. Let's go to Atlanta before we talk about Arizona, because Arizona doesn't have a head coach. Kevin Stefanski brings over Alex Van Pelt, who was a former OC in Cleveland as quarterback coach. Tommy Rees, who was his latest OC in Cleveland, as his offensive coordinator and play caller. So Kevin Stefanski is not going to call plays. Jeff Ulbrich, who did a tremendous job, especially with the two first round defensive ends, getting pressure to the quarterback. The Falcons' defense was much improved last year. He stays as defensive coordinator. They obviously have Drake London. We know what Stefanski did in that system with Nick Chubb when he was healthy in Cleveland. I'm very excited to see Bijan Robinson with him. I said I've gotten indifferent about Kevin Stefanski because I didn't think he was the greatest play caller in the world, but I didn't think he was the greatest head coach in the world either. But he brought stability to the Browns organization, and he won in Cleveland when nobody else did. As long as Michael Penix stays healthy, and they go with him. I like this fit in Atlanta. And as I said before, I think Dave Canales and Bryce Young, I think that relationship is growing year over year. I like what Kellen Moore and Tyler Shuck did with the Saints. I think Tyler Shuck has real potential from what I saw, and I think the Saints can be really dangerous. And obviously, the Falcons Bucks rivalry is now back. Baker Mayfield and Kevin Stefanski, but I think for at least the first year or two, and Matt Ryan being there as president of football operations, it does feel like a rebirth in Atlanta after they just seemingly never recovered for 9 years after blowing the 28-3 lead in the Super Bowl. And again, for Arizona, I don't know who it's going to be. I look at that roster. If you like Jacoby Brissett, I thought he played well at the end of last year. They have two great receivers, and Marvin Harrison, Michael Wilson. We know what Trey McBride brings the tight end position. James Conner has been the heart and soul of that team at running back. So I think outside of a few offensive line pieces, specifically at guard, I like what they have, especially maybe if you can move something for Kyler Murray. You got Josh Sweat, you got Walter Nolan on that defensive line, you got Will Johnson in the backfield. So there are some pieces there in Arizona. And with the number three pick and not a great NFL class, maybe you do build up the defensive line or take a swing at another position. You run Jacoby Brissett for a year, and then you get your quarterback next year in 2027. Maybe you trade back. I think that's a scenario as well. You accumulate more picks so you can build it up. Obviously, you got to deal with Brock Purdy. You got to deal with Sam Darnold. And for now, you got to deal with Matthew Stafford in that division. So that is the tough sell for Arizona, but they got pieces there. I think Mike McDaniel is the perfect fit there with Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers. I love that hire. He's the complete opposite of Harbaugh. Harbaugh is sort of that tough guy mantra where Mike McDaniel sort of has that really nerdy side to him. I think he's going to get the best out of um, Justin Herbert. What they did with that Dolphins offense last year, the offense was not the problem, right? It was mostly the defense side of the ball. So, I think Mike is going to work there. I think it's a really good fit. I think he's going to get Justin Herbert to his best potential. I think Drew Benson did a really good job in Arizona. I think he's underrated. I think he's a really good hire. I think he's going to get the best out of Jared Goff there in Detroit. And then Sean Mannion's an interesting one because he's never called plays before. He was the quarterback coach in Green Bay. He now comes over to Philadelphia as the offensive coordinator. To me, he's either going to work or he's going to be an absolute disaster. If he does not work, I think it could mean a one and done situation for him and Nick Sirianni, and this whole Eagles, offense could blow up, and maybe even potentially they move off the quarterback, as crazy as that sounds, with Jalen Hurts. But I think he's going to bring some different ideas to the table. I think they're going to run more of that under center wide zone run game that they ran in Green Bay. I expect Saquon Barkley to be more productive than he was a year ago. I think they're going to use the middle of the field more so than they did a year ago. And regardless if they keep AJ Brown or not, I think that Sean Mannion was going to be a guy who next year reportedly was going to be on a lot of people's radar. I think Green Bay wanted to keep him in the building. The Eagles have a history of elevating young guys, Andy Reid and Nick Sirianni. These guys that maybe people don't feel like are ready. Maybe they're a year too early, but then they grow into that role. I think that could be the case with Sean Mannion. So again, the two I really don't get as hires to me were Jeff Halfway in Miami, as well as Todd Monken in Cleveland. But the rest of them, I think they have a real shot to work out, and we'll see what happens with Arizona. But this was one of the most wildest coaching cycles in history. Joe Brady. I think Quinn Kubiak's going to get at least one of the jobs. Todd Monken, Mike McCarthy, and Kevin Stefanski. That's five offensive minds. Depending on where you go with Arizona, and Harbaugh would be a defensive guy, special teams guy. But Robert Saleh, Jesse Minter, Jeff Halfway were the three defensive coaches that ended up getting hired in this cycle. I thought Chris Shula could have went to Pittsburgh. I thought there was a world where Brian Flores went to Vegas, and we did have more of a defensive-minded cycle. Of course, this will be the first Super Bowl since Super Bowl 51 between the Patriots and Falcons that we have two defensive head coaches on the field together. Um, you know, the last defensive head coach to win a Super Bowl that wasn't in Bill Belichick was Pete Carroll in Super Bowl 48 against the Broncos when he was with Seattle. So I said this year in the NFL, it was the return of the under center run game, play action pass, play good defense. I think they're running the ball in defense and kicking field goals, even though more teams are being aggressive on fourth down, has almost regressed back to the mean. And the NFL is reciprocal, as they say. And so we'll see how these guys work out. I just think Todd Monken smells like a one and done coming down the tracks. I have no idea what Cleveland's doing. It looks like they're tanking for Arch Manning, which is the same reason why I think the Jets did not fire Aaron Glenn. But that is my thoughts on the NFL Coaching Carousel for 2026. Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.